Thank you for downloading this RealAgriculture podcast. Excite your crops with inputs from Excite Bio. Access nitrogen and phosphorus with Excite Bio's lineup of inoculants and ag biologicals. Since 2010, they've been helping farmers harness the power of the soil. Learn more at excitebio.ca. That's XITEBIO.ca.
We're joined right now at Trade Talk at the NAFB meeting in Kansas City by Dan Halstrom. He is with U.S. Meat Export Federation. Dan, it's great to meet you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's talk about some of the opportunities and maybe even a little bit of some of the challenges. Right now, what are some of the markets that you see as a key focus for the export of U.S. meat products?
Well, I think if you look at both beef and pork, Latin America, you got to start there. Mexico, Central America, Colombia, these are all markets that have been developing for some time and have really shown some good results the last few years. And of course, our mainstay markets would be North Asia, Japan and Korea in particular. So I think on the one hand, those markets are sort of our key component markets, but we do have some emerging regions as well. Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and of course you can't forget about talking about some parts of Africa, West Africa, Ghana, Benin, Nigeria, and of course Central Africa with Angola. So yeah, that you got the established markets, but then you have these emerging regions that show a lot of promise.
And we're talking about beef, pork, and sheep?
Yeah, beef, pork, and lamb. Yep.
Okay, so those are a lot of different markets. You're across three different meat commodities. None of those markets are really the same. There's a lot of different conversations happening in all those markets cross-product.
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons that the U.S. Meat Export Federation is in the middle of this, because you're right. We export to over 80 countries a year on beef and pork, and primarily beef and pork. And, there are different cultures, different languages in a lot of cases, different eating styles and preferences. But we have people on the ground in all these markets, and they're all nationals from these countries. So I don't claim to be an expert in all these, but I do have confidence in our staff that they are. So this is one way we circumvent that. And certain cuts out of certain beef or pork, it's about putting the right cut in the right market to maximize value. So a beef tongue in Japan is worth a lot more than a beef tongue in the U.S., for example. So center of the plate, beef tongue, not here, but in Japan it is. So these are the sorts of things that we're trying to maximize.
We hear a lot that protectionism around the world is increasing. That the idea of free and open globalized trade is kind of a thought that's past us. You're on the ground doing this every day. Is that overstated? Is protectionism really on the rise?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you talk to. In my opinion, yes, it's overstated. I think that if you talk to the trade in these countries, we're very well acquainted with the trade in Mexico and Japan and Korea, for example. I would say that the trade in these countries relies on us. And the consumers in these countries rely on us. It's okay to be proud of our own production and our own products. We should be in the U.S. But I think the way we maximize the value is that the two coexist. We don't have we have a surplus, an ag surplus, and there's countries out there that are a severe deficit. So if you look at it just from the standpoint of food security alone, it makes a lot of sense. And then you add in the economic component, it makes even more sense, right? We're able to maximize the value of our great production in the U.S. by being able to export.
So the work you're doing so let's just say with Japan, for example, you have people on the ground there. You're talking to buyers, consistent buyers of the product or potential buyers of the products. Are you educating them on, just talk about what that actually looks like on the ground? What are you doing?
Yeah, if you ask me what is the single thing, the most important thing we do, it's education. It's telling our story. It's telling what is the product mix, what's available, what's the cooking, what are the different cooking alternatives, how do you maximize the eating experience, this sort of thing that we're doing every day. Then you have the bigger overarching issues. What are we doing on sustainability? What are we doing to minimize the impact on the environment? All of this falls in that bucket. The other big thing that we do is we're bringing buyers and sellers together. We know our database in Japan could be up to 20,000 names, in the trade, established over 49 years we've been in Japan as an organization. So putting buyers and sellers together and creating a platform where trade can be maximized is the other big thing that we do. And then, of course, everything that comes up with that. The more success you have, the more issues you have with non-tariff trade barriers. The list goes on. And we get involved in all of that. So yeah, but the number one thing is education. Telling our story and answering a lot of questions.
Yeah, and what are some of those, from a sustainability standpoint, what are the questions? Like, is it as simple as, like, hey, is your product sustainable? Or is it, like, I'm assuming there's a lot more depth to it than that.
A lot more depth than that. But they don't, even in a place like Japan, but especially less developed markets, they don't know what they don't know. So, they don't, there's a misperception that maybe everyone has a 100,000 head cattle feedlot in the U.S. That's not the reality. The reality is that 98 to 99% of our cattle production is from a family farm, where the family is raising the cows and the offspring steers and heifers, explaining that and realizing that we do have a large volume, but there's a lot of care that goes into it, and it's no different than a family farmer in Japan. So I think this is a lot of what, the more they learn, the more they want to learn more, right? And they really do appreciate our safety. We're the world's renowned expert in safety. We're assumed to be number one there. So, yeah, that's a lot of what we do.
Yeah, you think about beef, highly competitive out there. You're competing against countries like Canada, for example. What are some of the ways that you separate your product, or do you even do that? Do you say, like, okay, I know the Canadians or the Mexicans or the Brits were here last week, but let me tell you, like, talk about that a little bit deeper.
Without a doubt, differentiation of our product is key, and the beef is a good example. Who are our big competitors globally? Australia. You've got Brazil now. You've got Canada, Mexico, a lot of different competitors. We're not the only one that's figured out the value return from exports. But if you look at where we're at with high-quality, chilled, grain-fed, grain-finished beef, there's no one like us. Australia has some grain-fed, it's more short-fed, it's more barley, it's less corn. We're different, and that's what we focus in on. And a lot of times people say, hey, Brazilians are much cheaper in price, but it's grass-fed. It's different. And I'm not saying I am saying we're better, but people's interpretation of better is different. A lot of customers in a lot of countries want options, and it's pretty hard to duplicate what we have to provide in terms of graded, choice and higher, chilled U.S. grain-finished beef.
Export of lamb, it's the smallest of the three that you're responsible for. How big of an opportunity is that?
Well, it's a rather significant opportunity incrementally, because the industry is much smaller and the amount being exported is relatively small. That being said, two of the largest regions for U.S. lamb are the Caribbean region, which of course is heavily focused on food service, so very high end, which is a natural for U.S. lamb. And Mexico is the other one. You got everything from head meat on the offal side going to Mexico on lamb to racks, and everything in between. So Mexico and Caribbean are the two big opportunities, and we've seen a lot of progress this year with the introduction of lamb shoulders from the U.S. into the Mexican market, breast meat, and a few other things. So much smaller in total volume, but incrementally, it's very impactful potentially.
Yeah. Hey, to wrap up, I just want to one more meat or beef question. Sorry, prices have been strong, and domestic consumption, and of course your bailiwick exports, they've also been strong. Even considering where some of the price points are, there is strong demand for beef. We're learning a lot about how the elasticity of demand, maybe recalibrating some of our charts or our past assumptions.
No, you're exactly right. I would say that in certain parts of the world, U.S. beef demand is record-breaking. And resilient is another word people are using. It wasn't, I like to use the example of Mexico. It wasn't that long ago where you reached a certain cutout point on a choice cutout. Let's say you got to 290 on the choice cutout. It would just shut off demand to the Latin American markets. Not the case today. We ran up to close to 330 here not too long ago on the choice cutout. And you know what? Mexico and Central America, they're still buying. So I think what you're seeing is a realization and an adoption of the fact that the international Latin American buyer wants quality and is willing to pay for it. So they're following the market up and down, it's when you get a really reliable market like Japan has been for decades, and we're starting to see that with Mexico, they're buying in all sorts of market conditions. Why? Because they appreciate our quality.
Yeah. And obviously China is a big focus.
Yeah, China's big as well. And a lot of people are saying, hey, China, there's all this anti-China sentiment. We don't particularly prescribe to that. It's volatile, but it's a $2 billion market for U.S. beef. That's significant.
Dan, thanks a lot for joining us here today. Really appreciate it, and we'll chat with you again soon.
Thank you so much.